Professor Vexthanor stood before the massive crystal podium, his translucent body catching the light from 3 different suns that shone through the dome of the Great Hall. Around him, creatures that defied imagination filled every seat. Some floated in bubbles of gas, others stood on dozens of legs, and a few existed as pure energy contained in metal shells. This was the Intergalactic Academic Council, and today marked their most important gathering in 1,000 years. Friends from across the stars, Vexthanor began, his voice carried by invisible waves that every species could understand. We gather not just to celebrate our knowledge, but to learn something new. In the front row, Commander Hyrath shifted, his massive bulk. He was 12 feet tall with skin like black stone and eyes that glowed red. His people had conquered 17 star systems, but today he came to learn, not to fight. Professor, you said you found something special. What is it? Vexthanor touched a control and images appeared in the air above them. Behold Earth 3947, a small blue planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy. The beings there call themselves humans. They live only about 80 of their years, and their technology is so simple, they still use wheels to move around. Dr. Kelvaris made a sound like water bubbling. Her species had lived for millions of years and had brains the size of small buildings. Why should we care about such simple creatures? What could they possibly know that we do not? That is exactly what I thought, Vexthanor replied. But then my scouts found this. He held up a small device containing translated text. It is an essay written by one of them. A human named Jinho wrote it after witnessing something that happened in his settlement. The Great Hall grew quiet. Even the energy beings stopped their constant humming. Vexthanor continued. The essay tells the story of a child named Mina. She was only 7 years old when a great disaster struck her home. The ground shook and split open. Buildings fell. Many died. Some of the alien beings nodded. They had seen such things on countless worlds. Natural disasters were common throughout the universe. But here is where it becomes interesting, Vexthanor said. This child, Mina, lost everything. Her parents died. Her home was destroyed. She had no food, no shelter, and she was badly hurt. By all logic, she should have focused only on staying alive. Commander Hyrath leaned forward. That is what any smart creature would do. Survival first. Yes, agreed Dr. Kelvaris. Even our youngest offspring know this basic rule. Vexthanor's crystalline face seemed to smile. But Mina did something different. Even though she was dying, even though she had nothing, she spent her last days helping others. She gave her food to babies who were crying. She sang songs to frightened children. She held the hands of strangers and told them everything would be okay. Silence filled the Great Hall. Many of the alien beings looked confused. Elder Korthval, whose species was so old they remembered when the galaxy was young, spoke, in a voice like wind through caves. That makes no sense. Why would she waste her energy on others when she needed it to live? According to the essay, Vexthanor replied, when someone asked her that same question, Mina simply said, because they need it more than I do. The me. Hall erupted in strange sounds as hundreds of different species tried to process this information. Some made clicking noises, others hummed, and a few flashed different colors. But that is impossible, Dr. Kelvaris said. Every living thing in the universe puts itself first. It is the most basic law of existence. Vexthanor touched another, control, and the essay's words appeared in the air, translated into symbols every species could read. The human who wrote this, Jinho, was a teacher at a place where young humans learn. He watched Mina during those final days. He wrote that she died holding the hand of an old man she had never met before, telling him that tomorrow would be better. Commander, Hyrath's red eyes dimmed. She had no reason to believe that she was dying. Exactly, Vexthanor said. She chose to believe it anyway. And according to Jinho, that choice made her more powerful than any weapon or technology. The Great Hall fell completely silent. Beings that had lived for eons, that had built cities among the stars and bent the laws of physics to their will, sat in stunned amazement at the story of one small human child. Elder Korthval spoke again, his ancient voice now carrying a strange sadness. In all my millions of years I have seen the birth and death of stars. I have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. But I have never seen anything like this. Dr. Kelvaris's massive brain pulsed with new thoughts. These humans, they are not just surviving. They are doing something else entirely. What are they doing? Commander Hyrath asked. Vexithanor looked around the great hall at all the powerful beings from across the galaxy. I believe, my friends, that they are truly living, and perhaps it is time we learned how. Professor Vexithanor raised his hand, and the great hall became completely quiet. Even the smallest sound stopped. The floating beings stopped their gentle humming. The energy creatures dimmed their lights. Everyone waited. Now we will read the essay together, Vexithanor announced. I will speak the words, and the translation machines will carry them to your minds in your own languages. He touched the control panel, and soft blue light filled the space above them. The words appeared slowly, like they were being written by an invisible hand. Vexithanor began to read in a clear, steady voice. I am Jinho, a teacher at Hangang Elementary School. I write this to remember Mina, age 7, who showed me what it means to be human when everything else was lost. Dr. Kelvaris shifted in her massive chair. Her brain, which could solve mathematical problems that would take computers years to finish, focused completely on these simple words. Something about them felt different from anything she had studied before. The story continued. Vexithanor's voice carried across the hall as he read about the day the earth shook. Buildings fell, like toys. The ground cracked open. Fire and water destroyed everything the humans had built. In just a few minutes, a peaceful town became a place of death and fear. Mina was playing in her backyard when it happened, the essay said. The house fell on top of her family. She dug through the stones and wood with her small hands, but it was too late. She was alone. Commander Hyrath felt his chest tighten. His people were warriors used to death and loss. But something about this small human child made him feel strange. She was so tiny, so weak compared to his kind. Yet she faced something terrible that would have broken many strong fighters. The reading continued. Jinho wrote about the refugee camp where the survivors gathered. Hundreds of humans lived in small tents with little food and no clean water. Many were hurt. Many were sick. The strong ones took care of themselves first, which made sense to all the aliens listening. But then came the part about Mina that made everyone in the Great Hall lean forward. Every morning Mina would wake up and look around the camp. She would find the people who were crying and sit with them. She had only one small piece of bread each day, but she would break it into pieces and give most of it away. Elder Korthval, who had lived so long he had forgotten what it felt like to be surprised, felt something new stirring in his ancient mind. This cannot be right, he whispered to himself. No creature gives away its only food. But the essay continued with more impossible stories. Mina would sing to babies who could not sleep even though she was in pain from her own injuries. She would tell jokes to children who had lost their parents even though she was an orphan herself. She would help old people walk to get water, even though she was weak and tired. When the camp leaders asked her why she did these things, Jinho wrote. Mina looked confused by the question. Because they need it more than I do, she said, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. Something very strange began happening in the Great Hall. Dr. Kelvaris noticed water coming from her optical sensors. She had never experienced this before. Her species did not produce water from their eyes. She touched the wetness with one of her appendages and stared at it in wonder. All around the hall, other beings were having similar experiences. Commander Hyrath felt his throat making strange sounds, like he wanted to roar, but could not. The floating beings began to sink lower. In their gas bubbles, the energy creatures flickered in ways their builders had never programmed. Vexithanor continued reading. his own voice becoming softer as the story reached its end. Mina grew weaker each day. The injuries from the earthquake were too much for her small body to fight. But even as she lay dying in the medical tent, she continued to think of others. On her last day, Jinho wrote, an old man was brought to the tent. He was scared and alone. Mina was barely conscious, but she reached out and took his hand. "Do not worry," she whispered to him. "Tomorrow will be better." The hall was so quiet that the sound of a single water drop could have been heard across the entire space. Every being in the room focused on the final words of the essay. The old man asked her how she could know that tomorrow would be better. Everything was destroyed. Many people were dead. There was no food, no homes, no hope that anyone could see. Mina smiled and closed her eyes. "I do not know if it will be better," she said. "I just choose to believe it will be." Vexthanor paused. His crystalline form was trembling slightly. He had read thousands of documents from hundreds of worlds, but none had affected him like this simple human story. "She died an hour later," he read. "But before she went," she squeezed the old man's hand and whispered, "Take care of the others for me." And he did. We all did. Mina taught me that being human is not about what happens to us. It is about what we choose to do when everything falls apart. When Vexthanor finished reading, the Great Hall remained silent for a very long time. 847 species, representing the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, sat in complete stillness, each trying to understand what they had just experienced. Dr. Yithmora slowly rose from her seat, her 6 arms shaking like leaves in a strong wind. She was the smartest mind doctor in the galaxy, someone who studied how different species think and feel. She had examined the brains of creatures from 1,000 worlds, but today she looked confused and amazed. "My friends," she said, her voice barely loud enough to hear, "something has happened here that I have never seen before in all my years of study." The Great Hall stayed completely quiet. Many of the alien beings were still touching their faces, confused by the water that had come from their eyes. Others were making soft sounds they had never made before. Some were just sitting very still, like they were trying to solve the hardest puzzle in the universe. Dr. Yithmora walked to the center of the hall, her multiple eyes looking at each group of beings. "For thousands of years, I have studied every known form of intelligent life. I have mapped their thoughts, measured their emotions, and understood their behaviors. But these humans have something we have never encountered." Commander Hyrath wiped his face with the back of his massive hand. "What do you mean, Doctor?" "They are weak creatures who live short lives. What could they possibly have that we do not?" "Doctor." Yithmora's tentacles moved in complex patterns as she organized her thoughts. "They have the ability to create meaning where there should be none. Look at what we just witnessed. This child, Mina, lost everything. Her family was dead. She was dying herself. Every logical thought should have told her to give up, to save her strength, to think only of herself." Professor Vexthanor's crystal body flickered with different colors as he processed this information. "That is correct. Every species we know follows the basic rule of survival. When resources are limited, you save them for yourself. When danger comes, you protect yourself first. This is how evolution works." "Exactly," Dr. Yithmora said, her voice growing stronger. "But Mina did the opposite. She gave away her food when she was hungry. She used her energy to help others when she needed it to live. She chose to believe in hope when there was no logical reason for hope to exist." Elder Korthval made a deep sound, like wind blowing through ancient caves. His species was older than most of the stars in the sky. They had seen civilizations rise and fall, had learned secrets that younger species could not imagine. But now he sounded like he was discovering something for the first time. "This should not be possible," he said slowly. "Such behavior goes against every natural law we understand. Creatures that waste their resources on others should die out quickly. Their genes should disappear. Yet humans seem to do this regularly." Dr. Kelvaris's massive brain pulsed with new thoughts. She could calculate the movements of entire star systems. could solve problems that would take normal minds centuries to understand. But this simple human story had confused her completely. "Dr. Ythmora," she said, "are you suggesting that these humans have evolved beyond the need for logical survival?" "I am suggesting something even more strange," Dr. Ythmora replied. "I believe they have learned to find meaning in meaninglessness. They transform pain into purpose. They choose love when logic says they should choose fear." She gestured toward the air where the words of the essay still glowed softly. "Look at the result. This one small child, who died with nothing, has done something that none of our great civilizations have achieved. She has made beings from across the galaxy feel something we did not even know existed." Commander Hyrath looked down at his hands, which were still shaking slightly. "What is this feeling? My species has no word for it." "Nor does mine," admitted Dr. Kelveris. "Or mine," added Elder Korthaval. Dr. Ythmora moved closer to them, her voice growing soft and wondering. "I believe, my friends, that what you are feeling is what humans call meaning. Not just the meaning of words or the meaning of facts, but the meaning of existence itself." The hall filled with quiet sounds as hundreds of species tried to understand this new concept. Some clicked their claws thoughtfully, others hummed in low tones, a few flashed different colors as their minds worked. Professor Vexithaner's crystal form grew brighter as he struggled with the implications. "But we have built great cities among the stars. We have conquered disease and death. We have extended our lives for millions of years. How can we be missing something that a dying human child understood?" Elder Korthaval answered in a voice heavy with sadness and wonder. "Because we have been focused on surviving, not on living. We have been so busy staying alive that we forgot why we wanted to stay alive in the first place." Dr. Ythmora nodded slowly. "This child, Mina, lived only 7 years, but in her final days, she discovered something that we, with all our knowledge and power, have never found. She learned that the purpose of existence is not just to exist, but to make existence meaningful for others." Silence fell over the great hall once again. But this time it was different. It was not the silence of confusion or shock. It was the silence of creatures who had just realized that everything they thought they knew about life was incomplete. They had come here to study a primitive species. Instead, they had discovered that they were the ones who needed to learn. The news traveled faster than light itself. Within days, every corner of the galaxy had heard about the human essay that made the Great Council weep. Ships carried copies of Jinho's simple words to worlds so distant that their light had not yet reached Earth. Ancient beings who had not felt curiosity in millions of years suddenly wanted to understand what a 7-year-old human child had discovered. On Vorthan Prime, something impossible happened. For the first time in their civilization's history, the High Logic Council made a decision that was not based on mathematics or efficiency. They decided to create something beautiful. The Vorthans had always lived by perfect rules. Every building was exactly the right size. Every action served a specific purpose. Every citizen did exactly what the computers calculated was most useful. But after reading about Mina, they felt something strange growing inside them. "We will make art," announced Supreme Logic Master Thanavel to a crowd of confused citizens. "We will create beauty from our own pain, just as this human child created hope from her suffering." The first Vorthan art exhibition was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Citizens who had lived for thousands of years in perfect order began painting pictures of their deepest feelings. They wrote poems about loneliness they had never admitted to feeling. They composed music that sounded like crying and laughing at the same time. One ancient Vorthan named Veltar, who had calculated supply routes for 3 millennia, stood before his first painting and wept. It showed a single flower growing through a crack in metal. "I never knew I was sad until I tried to paint happiness," he told his friend. Far across the galaxy, something even more shocking was happening on Kelthar. The Keltharian hive mind had existed as one connected consciousness for so long that individual thoughts were almost forgotten. Every Keltharian citizen thought the same thoughts, felt the same feelings, and made the same decisions at exactly the same time. But after learning about Mina's individual choice to help others, cracks began to appear in their perfect unity. A drone citizen designated as Worker 7749 suddenly stopped in the middle of her daily tasks. She sat down and began to write words that came from her own mind, not from the hive. Other drones stopped their work to watch this impossible thing. "I wonder," she wrote in her first personal journal, "what it would feel like to hope for something that only I want, not something the hive wants." Within weeks, thousands of Keltharians were keeping personal journals. They wrote about dreams that were their own, fears that belonged to no one else, and hopes that they did not share with the hive mind. For the first time in their species' history, they were learning to be individuals. Commander Hyrath returned to his homeworld carrying something more precious than any weapon. He carried copies of the essay translated into his people's ancient war language. His species, the mighty Hyrathi, had built their entire civilization around conquest and strength. Their cities were fortresses. Their schools were training grounds. Their hospitals existed only to patch up warriors so they could fight again. But Hyrath stood before the War Council and said words that had never been spoken in their language before. "We will build places of healing, not places of preparing for battle." The other commanders roared with confusion and anger. "Have you gone mad?" demanded General Korath. "We are warriors, we fight, we conquer. What is this nonsense about healing?" Hyrath held up the essay. "A small human child, weaker than our youngest pup, has shown me something we never learned in all our victories. True strength comes from helping others, not from defeating them." The first Hyrathi hospital was built, where the greatest battle arena once stood. Warriors who had spent their lives learning to cause pain began learning to take pain away. They discovered that healing someone felt better than defeating them ever had. Dr. Yithmora used her influence to create something the galaxy had never seen before. She founded the Institute for Existential Studies, a place where beings came, not to learn facts or solve problems, but to understand why they existed at all. Creatures from hundreds of worlds traveled there to study human philosophy, human art, and human stories. They read about humans who sacrificed for strangers, who found joy in sadness, who chose love when hate would have been easier. The Institute's most popular class was called Learning to Live, taught by Professor Zimara, who had once been a master of quantum physics. Now she spent her days helping ancient beings understand simple human concepts like kindness, hope, and purpose. "These humans live such short lives," she would tell her students, "but they fill those lives with meaning. We have lived forever, but we have been empty." Elder Korthval, the oldest being in the known galaxy, stood before the Galactic Senate and spoke words that changed everything. His voice, which had announced the birth and death of stars, now carried a new kind of wisdom. "For 17 million years my people have existed. We have seen the universe grow and change. We have gained knowledge beyond measure, but we have been like empty vessels, holding information without understanding why we hold it." He gestured to a hologram of Earth floating above the assembly. "These tiny humans, who live shorter lives than our briefest thoughts, have discovered the secret we missed. Existence without purpose is not living. It is simply not dying." The galaxy awakened. Research stations that had once studied the movement of planets began studying human poetry. Libraries that held the history of 1,000,000 worlds added sections on human stories of hope and love. Schools that taught the science of surviving began teaching the art of living. And at the center of it all was the simple essay of a teacher named Jinho, who had written about a little girl named Mina, who chose to believe that tomorrow would be better. Ships began arriving at Earth from every corner of the galaxy. But these were not warships coming to conquer or research vessels coming to study. These were pilgrimage ships, carrying beings who had traveled across the stars to learn from the species they had once considered primitive. Professor Vexathanor was among the first to arrive. His crystalline body had been changed by Vorthon engineers, so he could show emotions the way humans did. Now his face could smile and his eyes could produce the water that humans called tears. He stood in the ruins of Sol, watching something that amazed him. A young human man named Junho was digging through the rubble of a collapsed building. The recent earthquake had destroyed much of the city, just like the one that had taken Mina's life years before. Junho was tired and dirty, his hands bleeding from moving heavy stones. But he kept working because he could hear someone calling for help from under the debris. "Sir," one of Vexthanor's research assistants said, "this human has been working for 18 hours without rest. His body shows signs of extreme exhaustion. Why does he not stop to care for himself first?" Vexthanor watched as Junho finally pulled a small child from the wreckage. The child was not related to him, not even from his neighborhood. But Junho held the little girl gently and carried her to safety, tears of joy running down his dirty face. "He continues, because this is what humans do," Vexthanor said softly. "They still suffer, just as they did when Mina lived. But they still choose to help each other. They still choose hope." Across the city, Dr. Yithmora was observing another scene that filled her with wonder. A small girl named Sora, no older than Mina had been, was sitting on a bench outside a destroyed school. She had a small lunchbox with her, containing what looked like her only meal of the day. An old man sat nearby, his clothes torn and dirty. He had no home, no food, no family to care for him. He watched hungrily as Sora opened her lunchbox. Without hesitation, Sora walked over to the old man and offered him half of her small meal. When he tried to refuse, she insisted. "You look hungrier than me, grandfather," she said with a smile. Dr. Yithmora's multiple hearts beat faster as she watched this simple act. "This child never knew Mina," she told her team. "She never read Jinho's essay. Yet she does exactly what Mina did. This capacity for selfless love appears to be built into their very nature." The old man accepted the food with tears in his eyes. As he ate, Sora sat beside him and began telling him funny stories to make him laugh. Even though she had given away half her food, even though her own home had been destroyed in the earthquake, she chose to bring joy to a stranger. More ships arrived each day. The space around Earth became crowded with vessels from 1,000 different worlds. Commander Hyrath brought a fleet of hospital ships not to invade but to help with disaster relief. The Keltharian hive mind sent individual drones to learn about personal choice. The Vorthons came with art supplies hoping to learn how humans created beauty from tragedy. But the most important decision came from the Galactic Council itself. Elder Korthaval stood before the emergency session and made an announcement that shocked the entire galaxy. "Earth will be declared the first protected learning world in our history," he said. "No species may interfere with human development. No technology may be shared with them. No contact may be made that would change their natural growth. We are here to learn from them, not to change them." The Human Studies Institute was built in orbit around Earth, a massive space station where beings from across the galaxy could observe and study human behavior, but there were strict rules. No human could know about the aliens watching them. No human behavior could be influenced by outside forces. Dr. Yithmora became the first director of the institute. Her job was to help other species understand what humans had that they were missing. Students came from every known civilization to take classes with names like The Philosophy of Hope, The Science of Sacrifice, and Understanding Love Without Logic. One of her most popular lectures was called Why Humans Choose Meaning Over Survival. She would show videos of humans helping each other during disasters, sharing food during famines, and choosing to hope when everything seemed hopeless. "Observe," she would tell her students, pointing to a screen, showing humans building homes for strangers after a flood. They could use these resources to make their own lives more comfortable. Logic says they should, but they choose to help others instead. This is not a learned behavior, this is who they are. Elder Korthaval spent his final years as Earth's guardian, watching over the small blue planet like a protective parent. In his last report to the Galactic Senate, he wrote words that became famous throughout the galaxy. "We came to Earth believing we were the advanced species and humans were primitive. We were wrong. We were the primitives. We had learned to survive, but we had forgotten how to live. Humans in their brief existence have mastered the art of finding purpose in pain, meaning in suffering, and hope in hopelessness." He looked Up at the stars he had traveled between for millions of years and continued. We measured advancement by how long we could live and how much we could build. Humans measure advancement by how much they can love and how much they can give. They are right, and we were wrong. The essay that had started it all, Jinho's simple words about little Mina, became the most important document in galactic history. It was taught in schools on every world, translated into every language and carved into monuments across the stars. The new galactic age had begun, and at its heart was the most human lesson of all. That true strength comes not from what you can take or keep, but from what you choose to give when you have nothing left to give.